The province invoking the Notwithstanding clause for the second time this month. First, it was obviously to end the teacher strike. It's now being used to protect three laws that affect transgender youth. Before this sitting, it had only been used once before in Alberta. Now, we're going to take a closer look at this part of our Constitution, the Notwithstanding Clause, how it works and why it exists in the first place. We're joined now by Howard Kislowitz. He's a University of Calgary law professor who specializes in constitutional law. So what do you make of the Alberta government using the Notwithstanding Clause twice in such short order?
Conventional wisdom on the Notwithstanding Clause for many years was that it was sort of the nuclear weaponry of Canadian constitutional law and politics, that all legislatures wanted to have access to it, but actually using it would raise a significant cost politically. What we're seeing in the last few years, perhaps, is an increased willingness among provincial legislatures across the country to use the Notwithstanding Clause, and not only to use it, but to use it in a way we think of as preemptive. So often when we teach about the Notwithstanding Clause, we think of it as a potential tool for dialogue between courts and legislatures. And on that theory, a law would be tested in court, and a court would give a ruling on whether the law violated the charter, and only if the government lost and still disagreed would it invoke the Notwithstanding Clause. But what we're seeing here in Alberta, what we saw in Quebec in the last few years, was our preemptive uses of the Notwithstanding Clause. So we never have a chance to hear from courts on the constitutionality of the law, and governments never have a chance to show their evidence of why they think the law is justified.
Can you just explain what it is and how it works?
Sure. So the Notwithstanding Clause is contained in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's Section 33 of that document, and it has always been part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the way that it works is it allows a legislature, so this would count for provinces or the federal parliament, although the federal parliament has never invoked the Notwithstanding Clause. It allows one of those legislatures to put into a law a provision that says that the law shall operate notwithstanding, that's where the language comes from, notwithstanding certain provisions of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, those provisions include the protections that we have for our fundamental freedoms, like freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of conscience and religion. And it also includes our rights to life, liberty, and security of the person, our rights to equality, and the rights that we think of as being attached to the criminal process, like rights against unreasonable search and seizure, rights against arbitrary arrest and detention, cruel and unusual punishment. So all of those rights can be not withstood, so to speak, if a legislature so chooses.
The federal government is concerned about the increasing use of it, not just in Alberta and other provinces as well, and has asked the Supreme Court to consider limits on how and when it can be invoked. What's happening there? How's that playing out?
One of those arguments is that even where a legislature uses a Notwithstanding Clause, it remains open to a court to make a declaration about whether the law would have passed constitutional muster. There is another provision in the Charter, Section 28 of the Charter, which also uses the word notwithstanding. And it says that notwithstanding anything else in this Charter, the rights guaranteed in it are guaranteed equally to male and female persons. And so there's an argument that the Notwithstanding Clause cannot be used to insulate challenges to legislation on the basis that they violate sexual equality. So one argument is that the Notwithstanding Clause does have limits by Section 28. Another argument is that the Notwithstanding Clause has limits in terms of how effective it is at preventing courts from opining. And then there are even more abstract arguments that, read in context, the Notwithstanding Clause has other inherent limits that have yet to be defined.